My name is Dr. Gordon Medlock, and I am a faculty member and coach with the Wright Graduate University for the realization of human potential. I'll be presenting on the topic of, for part of our Idea Café series, on the topic of yearning for more meaning, how yearning-based learning can help you transform yourself as a person, a coach, and a leader. Let me give you a little bit of context about me in terms of my background and what I'm bringing to the presentation today. I have an academic background in philosophy and psychology, studied at Yale University with a specialty in existential philosophy and psychology, which has been a big part of the practice at the Wright Foundation throughout our entire program. I've worked very closely with Bob and Judith over the years, Doctors Bob and Judith Wright, to develop our model, both in terms of our framework for human development as well as our educational model. The work today that I'll be talking about is yearning-based learning, and I first discovered the concept of yearning in Dr. Judith Wright's work, her work in the early 2000s on soft addictions and also the one decision. And she identified what I would call yearning as the meaning emotion. It's the emotion that connects us with what really matters in our life and what's really important. And I found this personally very important in terms of, instead of thinking of meaning as something abstract and cognitive, which as an academic I tended to do, she helped me see that yearning is actually something that I feel deeply in the moment. And actually part of this presentation today comes from a deep yearning on my part to share what I think is really an important part of education that needs to be more broadly distributed. So I hope you enjoy the presentation, and I look forward to conversations with you following on any questions you might have. And thank you for your interest.
Let's talk about our presentation today. We're going to be looking at what do we mean by yearning. It's kind of an old-fashioned term. Don't use it a lot, so people might not be familiar with it. What is yearning-based learning, to look at it in terms of an educational methodology, and looking at how this yearning-based learning leads to a dynamic of personal transformation. It's a main focus of our work here at Wright. And then finally, some snapshots of a yearning-based learning curriculum, so you can get a little bit of a flavor of what it looks like to be a student in our program and the kind of things that people are learning in the process. You'll notice in the slide that I have here, the student is placed at the center of the educational experience. And there's a reason for that, because yearning-based learning begins with you as the student and what it is that you really care about and what you want to learn. And that's a very prominent part of our work. So let me say something about what we mean by what is yearning. Judith, as I mentioned, Dr. Judith Wright, actually, did some research back in the early 2000s in a book called The One Decision, also some work on soft addictions, where she defined yearning as a spiritual longing, a deep emotional hunger encoded in our very being. Now, what does that really mean? Well, she described some of the examples of what we mean by yearning. It's a state that we can access when we think of what is it we really yearn for in life. And she identified a set of yearnings that were pretty much universal in the human species. Yearning to matter, the yearning to make a difference, the yearning to belong and to connect, the yearning to feel alive and to exist, the yearning to make a difference and live a life of purpose, and many others. It's an emotional state, an affective state that connects you to what really matters in your life in the moment. A good way to think about it is you can look at the contrast between wanting and yearning. Imagine a 2-year-old in the grocery store sitting in the little cart that we push through, and we're going through, and she suddenly wants this, and she wants that. Oh, I want to touch this. I want to grab this new box. I want to knock this over. What does this taste like? I want that candy. I want that candy. The wanting is always about something out there that we want to go after. It's part of our seeking drive in our species as mammals, as human beings. It's a big part of that we are driven by the wants that take us out into the world. But as you notice, it's got a kind of frantic quality sometimes. And it can lead you to kind of an obsessive preoccupation with those things that you've got to have to feel okay inside. Well, yearning is a very different kind of emotion. It's a turning inward to look at, well, what's the yearning that's going on for me? When you think about yearnings, like the yearning to belong, or the yearning to be loved and to love, that's a very different space. If you notice, you can feel the affective difference between that more excited, wanting approach to life and this yearning-based approach that's really more centered, more quiet, more inward, connecting to the deeper meaning of things. So I'm going to say a little bit more about the neuroscience of that in just a moment, but that's an important distinction between yearning and meaning, and I hope that helps to clarify what we're talking about here today. Well, it all starts here with attachment. The beginning of yearning starts with that infant-mother bonding and that attunement that happens. It's part of our basic neurobiology. It's part of who we are as a species. That is essential to the perpetuation of our species. That bonding, that connection, that feeling of being one with each other. It's Jack Panksepp is one of my new heroes in this field of neuroscience and neurobiology, and he's described 7 different emotional programs or systems within the human mind or human brain that drive much of our behavior, a very high percentage of it. And one of those systems is the care system of nurturing love. And if you look at just the connection that happens in those optimal moments of connection between a mother and the infant, or a parent, or any caregiver in the child, you have a sense of what yearning is about, that longing for connection and to belong. Okay? Other emotional systems of social bonding and play are other pieces of our emotional life that Jack Panksepp has identified as part of who we are as a species. These are programmed into us as they're the foundation for all the cognitive work that we do as a result of that. So the emotional foundation is really the basis of the mind and the development of our thought process, which is what we're going to say a little bit more about shortly. So I've come to think of yearning as the meaning emotion. So what do we mean by that? Well, Judith, as I mentioned, wrote this book, The One Decision. And part of that book focused on the sense that if we're able to focus our consciousness on this deeper sense of yearning in the moment, and we go to that, we suddenly are able to connect with what really matters for us and what's meaningful in the moment. So the yearning is actually connected to the creation of a sense of meaning. And she talked about the one decision, and on some level, the one decision that drives all one decisions is the one decision to be conscious, to be aware in the moment of what you're actually feeling, and to look deeper at that yearning to see what you're connecting with. So she says this is really the most important decision we make in our life, the one decision to consciously live our life moment to moment with a sense of meaning. So yearning is the meaning emotion. One of the distinctions that really drives the distinction between, we talked about yearning versus wanting. Yearning versus craving is really clear because you notice with wanting, there's that excited kind of sense of I want this, I want that. Well, craving is when it becomes obsessive. Like, I've got to have this. I've got to have that particular car, or I want to go on that particular trip, or something that I really want that I really must have. That chocolate candy, that specific brand or the chai latte. That's one of my weaknesses. It's got to be just the chai latte with the right flavor. Got to have one right now, actually, but I'll hold off on that. So that's what craving's about, okay? You get the idea. It's outward focused. It's very specific. It activates what we call our task mode network, this very focused attention on I've got to have that to make me happy. Oftentimes that we think is going to make us happy may not actually fulfill our needs, as we'll soon learn, but that's the nature of craving. It's got to do with excitement and addiction, and one of Dr. Wright's contributions has been looking at the whole field of soft addictions, which I believe she was the first one to really speak and refer to in those terms, where we become over-attached to these little things that lead us to being unconscious. Thank you. I was thinking that would be a really helpful thing to have. Glass of water. I was feeling the want of a glass of water. Not quite a craving, but close. So. It also relates to a yearning that I have to feel nourished and taken care of as I'm doing this presentation. So thank you. Notice the yearning side of this. It's inward focused. The more universal needs. It's not specific. It's something that I can generally meet in many ways. It activates what we call our default mode network, which is that network of when we're at rest, we're in meditative state, when we're at peace within ourselves. There's a sense of the parasympathetic nervous system being activated where we're relaxed. That's the state in which yearning is activated. There's a deep sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. This last point is really important as the contrast. On the yearning side, it activates the opioid and oxytocin brain circuits. This is the brain chemistry that gives us that deep sense of satisfaction that comes with the mental state that we've been describing. Whereas the craving state activates a dopamine brain circuit, which activates and gets us high. That dopamine circuit can really flood the system very quickly and overwhelm these more subtle kinds of inward emotions. So part of the commitment to consciousness is to not be seduced into the outward wants and the cravings, but to stay connected to our deeper yearnings. So the good news is that yearnings and wants are not separate. It's not like you can have to do yearning. Yearnings are good and wanting is bad. Wanting is essential. All that wonderful creativity, the creation of new innovation, the technology innovations are all driven by that seeking, wanting, exploring impulse. But the point is that we can connect and find the yearnings in our wanting. And that's when we're able to really integrate our understanding. For example, in this yearnings exercise, I can take a want that I have. I pick any want, and I was thinking of wants that are strong for me. I love to travel. I like to go to San Miguel, Mexico, to London, to Paris. These are places that I really love to go, and it really is a want that I feel very deeply, strongly. But when I think about it, well, what's the yearning in that desire for travel? Well, part of it is it's the novelty of experience. When I go to a new place, I suddenly see things in a completely new way. In fact, I went on a trip to Eastern Europe this last summer, and it was like a part of the world I'd never experienced before. And I was looking and learning about these people and looking at myself in a different way. Just a whole new awareness of my own culture as well as the experience of being there. Well, that yearning to see life in a new way, to reflect on my life and understand it in a deeper way, is something that's available at any moment. I don't need to go to Bucharest to find that. I can find it right here, right now, in this presentation, in this discussion. So the yearnings are available to us moment to moment, and sometimes our wants lead us to thinking we've got to do it this way, whereas our yearnings take us to a deeper sense of how it's available in the moment. Okay? So this leads us to a very important contribution that Doctors Bob and Judith Wright have made in the look at the nature of yearning as it relates to engagement. They've described an engagement continuum. This came out in 2 books, by the way. The book Transformed in 2013, which really describes this learning model that we're talking about today. And more recently, their work on The Heart of the Fight, where they expanded this to look at relationships in a deeper way. And these next 2 slides are taken from The Heart of the Fight. Now, you've got the left side of the continuum is about the neutral or destructive forms of misengagement that can happen in any interaction. And it's the one where yearning is not engaged, and then we'll look at the right-hand side in just a moment. On the left-hand side of the engagement continuum, you've got total disengagement, just checked out, not involved, uninterested, right? We've all been in meetings where you're sitting in a meeting and you don't feel involved, you're thinking about something else, or you're multitasking. That's disengagement. You're not really involved in what's happening. Then there's this kind of sort of phase of engagement where it's we're nice, we're superficial, we're not getting into deep feelings or emotions, but we're kind of keeping it in a kind of safe zone. And that's sort of a form of engagement, but it's sort of engagement. Now, as I say that, I'm thinking as I'm presenting this right now, I'm kind of expressing content in a certain way. I'm not really revealing myself in a deeper and vulnerable way. So that's like, oh, there's deeper levels that I could go in my yearning to really have this message be communicated to you. So that's moving to the right side of the continuum, because I do have a yearning to connect and have an impact on you all that are here and on the people that are listening. Other kinds of misengagement, the pseudo-engagement, the drama that people create. You'll see this in family systems a lot. Persecutor, victim, rescuer. All of this drama that goes around when people aren't taking full responsibility for their life. And it creates an intense sense of engagement. Oh my gosh, who did what to whom? But it's not real. It's just on a superficial drama level, because you're not really bringing your own self in a deeper way to your own truth in that. So it's really a pseudo engagement. And then on the far end of this side of the spectrum, we've really got active destructive engagement, where you really become vindictive and really hostile, lack of respect, really cutting kinds of attacks on one another. And we see this today in American politics. We're really looking at, oh my gosh, it looks engaging, but it's really not. It's this destructive engagement that's really not connected to yearnings. It's not connecting to what people deeply feel and want, but it's part of this disengaged, non-yearning-based engagement. So we want to get away from that, right? That can become very debilitating. So what is the constructive alternative? Well, you'll notice on the left-hand side, consciousness, trust in your yearnings and emotions is the tipping point. It's that ability to connect to our yearnings that lead us to deeper engagement, where we're really now sharing ourselves more fully. We're talking about what our emotions are. Like as I'm presenting today, I feel a kind of mixture of a little bit of anxiety, like, how's this going? And are people connecting? And is this having an impact? Are people getting it? And also some joy of it's kind of fun to be up here and talking about this exciting topic that matters to me. So I get more engaged as I share more about what's going on with me emotionally in the moment. And when that becomes deeper is when we really are sharing with each other, where there's a mutuality. Now, this particular presentation doesn't allow for dialogue because it's more just my presenting this to you. But in a more mutual process, we would be going exploring what are our yearnings in the moment. We would be taking this to a deeper level. We'd be sharing it with each other in a deeper level. And the deeper we go and the more honest, the more risk-taking we go, it naturally evolves to what we call transformational engagement, where we're really looking at what is it that I really yearn for? What kind of impact do I want to have, not just here, but in the larger world? And so it takes us to a sense of higher purpose and meaning. So you can see on this engagement continuum that engagement, yearning-based engagement, naturally drives us to a sense of higher purpose and meaning in life. Again, it's the meaning emotion. The key here of this bubble, this consciousness bubble, is this whole game is about applied mindfulness. It's about being conscious in the moment of what you're doing and aware of the yearnings, the choice to go inward to see what's the yearning that's driving what I'm doing, and am I in touch with that and fulfilling that. By becoming conscious choice makers, you begin to generate actions that are evolutionary for you. That's from Deepak Chopra, but it could also be from Dr. Judith Wright, because it's exactly what the theory of learning is at Wright, which is this process of choice making consciously to choose a yearning-based life. So, you know a little bit now about yearnings. Now, what does all this have to do with yearning-based learning? How do you build an educational program around something called yearning-based learning? Well, at the Wright Graduate University, your education starts with you. That's a quote right from our catalog. And thank you, Ruth, as representing the university for having that as a reference for us here. So it starts with you as an individual. And so the yearning is not just about a set of subject matters, but who you are and who you're becoming in the process. Now, we have a number of content areas that we explore at the Graduate University. Transformational leadership is one of the main areas. In fact, our degree programs and certificates are in transformational leadership and coaching. So you get exposed to what transformational leadership looks like. You get to explore who are good transformational leaders, role models like, say, a Martin Luther King or an Abraham Lincoln or Buckminster Fuller, or anyone that you might think of as a transformational leader. I would include my colleague and mentor, Bob Wright, in this, because I think in a lot of ways he demonstrates what true transformational leadership is. It's about your own personal transformation, as well as your ability to transform the organizations and the world around you. And he certainly exemplifies that, as anyone who works with him and knows him can testify. So you're looking at how you become the transformational leader. You're not just learning the content out here. It's what yearning does that activate for you to want to lead and become one of those leaders, and then looking at how you step into that. We also teach emergence coaching. The other main certificate area and degree area is emergence coaching. And that's a very key area, which I'm going to talk about a bit more because it's something I'm very personally involved with. But coaching is one of the main focuses of our work here at Wright in our graduate work. You also learn about systems theory. Family systems are a very important dynamic. You can't understand yourself if you don't understand your family system and how that works. And also to be able to think in a systems perspective, that problems are not just linear. They're very complex, and often cycles of system factors can influence things that we're not aware of immediately. So it's a very important part of critical thinking as well. Developmental and Adlerian psychology are very important in our work. We look at Adlerian work quite a bit, and I'll talk a little bit about that in terms of the relationship to understanding the family system that we grow up in. In developmental psychology, many psychologists today sort of dismiss Freud as, oh, that was history. It's not something that we're interested in right now. But actually, the understanding that at every moment in our life we are projecting our unconscious beliefs and attitudes and thoughts onto one another and playing out transferences and projections and that part of our growth is to claim those projections and to understand what parts of ourselves is being played out, is a hugely profound part of transformational learning that was birthed by Freud's work. So it's not just treating these as historical sources, but seeing how we personally can connect to what they had to contribute and how we can learn from them even today. Human potential and existential psychology is another area that's very important to us. It inspires our work coming out of the 60s and 70s particularly. And the vision that we have of realization of human potential is driven by thought leaders like Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. And I want to emphasize that these subjects, again, are not just studied as outside content. Oftentimes when we're orienting new students to these thought leaders, Judith will talk about, well, we're going to be dating Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow today. You're building a relationship with these thought leaders, and you're discovering who they are, what made them, what were they exploring, what were their yearnings. So it's a relationship that you develop where you get to share and understand their world in a very profound way that's very exciting. Transformational learning theory and practice has been an area where we've contributed, as we're learning today, to that field in a very substantial way. And I also want to emphasize neuroscience and interpersonal neurobiology. It's been so exciting in the last 25 years to see the innovations in brain science and how it's helped to validate and help us understand the importance of emotion as a foundation for critical thinking, the development of decision-making ability, the whole way that we interact with each other. It's been amazingly in terms of validating a lot of the work that we've been doing. So you learn all of these different topics in yearning-based learning, but it's not just the content. It's your relationship with that content and how it informs your development. So this is the learning methodology that Judith came up with in her dissertation research back in around 2005, 2006, I believe it was, called the evaluating learning methodology, theory of evaluating, which is, evaluating is, simply put, is conscious engagement in your own transformation. It is actually yearning-based engagement. And I'm not going to be able to talk up to this slide in detail because a whole course could be done in this particular presentation. So I'm just going to say that, as you notice, yearning and engagement are the beginning of that process. We've seen about yearning-based engagement takes you to revelating. Now, revelating is a word that really combines two different central ideas. You're revealing yourself more as you engage in yearning-based engagement, as we saw earlier. But at the same time, you're getting aware of who you are and what the barriers are that you have to tackle. You're looking at what we call your matrix, the beliefs that you have that keep you from being your full self, and beginning to understand those family systems issues and the limiting beliefs that keep you limited. So you've got revelating as new awareness, new ahas, but also discovery of moments of new potential. Oh, this is a part of me that I didn't know that I had, that I can develop that, and that's a new part of me. So revelating is having those aha moments as well. But we believe very strongly that you can't just stay at aha to have your life work well. You have to liberate. You have to consciously take steps to challenge the limitations and to move past them. So those liberating moments are essential as a paired part of the process with revelating. Now, I think one of the really truly deep innovations in our work here at Wright is this concept of rematrixing. Because in much of the human potential movement, there was a lot of emphasis on new insights and moments of liberation. But what happens is people will have those moments and then they'll tell stories for the rest of their life about those great moments where they had this new insight. But it doesn't really change the rest of their life. They go back to the way things were. The key of rematrixing is strategically building on this yearning-based engagement and revelating and liberating to make and create new habits and to create a new way of living. That is the hard work, and that's the work we really dig into in what we call transformational working. The transformation happens in rematrixing and dedicating to this process. And so this is, I think, a huge contribution to our work, and I'll say a little bit more about that as we dig into it a bit. Just to understand, a couple quick slides to just kind of illustrate the notion of the matrix. This is a I think, accurate description of this huge ball that holds us back. That huge ball can be limiting beliefs about myself, that I'm not capable, or I'm not smart enough, or I don't matter, or whatever those kind of beliefs are that can drag us down and feel like we're not able to do what we want to be able to accomplish. And there are certain states of mind that can trigger those mistaken beliefs. I know for myself, when I get into a state of anxiety, I can suddenly start cycling into, oh, I can't do this, or this is too much, or it's too hard. And pretty soon I'm cycling back, and I've lost complete touch with the possibility that I was in touch with before. And I have to be able to recognize those states and be able to change them. This comes a lot out of Adler's work, and you'll notice the references on a lot of these slides that I will share with you at the end. And you will have also the availability of these slides as a PDF. If you're interested, you can let me know, and I'll make those available to you. But you're looking at Alfred Adler's work, who talked about, well, when we grow up, we create our first vision of what's the world. What does the world expect of me? What do I expect of the world? And who am I? And our families of origin is where we figure all that out for the first time. So this is an important context. In fact, it's the fundamental structure or framework that we all are operating with when we begin our growth work. Another piece of our matrix is our set of defenses. We all build defenses to protect ourselves. Sorry, a little thirsty there. So that was both a yearning and a hunger, I believe, or a want. The defenses are the defenses against the threats to survival. We build these up as a necessary part of our personality, and we rely on those to protect ourselves and to protect our self-esteem. Adler also referred to these as safeguarding tendencies, ways that we protect our self-image. These become habits that we are ingrained in to develop what we call a false self. It's false in the sense that it's the self that we are sort of responding to and reacting to in our upbringing to develop a sense of what works in our environment. It's not the true self and the self of the person that we're becoming by authentically engaging in our own transformation. So there's a distinction there where you're really looking at addressing these defenses, because defenses keep us closed. When you're in defensive mode, you're not going to let people in, you're going to protect yourself. Whereas, as we saw, the yearning-based approach is really to be open, to explore, and to look at new possibilities. And that means being able to step beyond those defenses. So the real power here is the power of rematrixing, which is literally, this matrix is a physical brain. It exists physically in our brain as a network of neural pathways. These neural pathways define what we feel, what we think, what we want, how we act, and these are all developed over time, over repeated experiences that become the matrix of how we operate in the world. The power of rematrixing is the capacity to what we call neuroplasticity, what the neuroscientists have described as neuroplasticity, which allows us to rewire our brain. Really, by learning new habits, we can change these neural pathways. Now, with kids growing up, that's what's so cool about kids, because you see them learning new things all the time. You can watch them building and putting together this new set of understandings of the world. And it's amazing how quickly these synapses are connecting and putting their world together and the way they start making sense. I was just at an event the other day watching a 2-year-old. I could see her just processing, just really amazingly just making sense of things. She couldn't talk at that time, but she was totally alert. You could see that she was really processing what was going on. So the good news is it doesn't stop at childhood. I am living proof that you don't stop having neuroplasticity when you get to be in the third of your life. At 72 years old, approaching 73, I'm still learning and growing. I'm still learning all kinds of new things. I am building new neural pathways. Now, some of those pathways, other ones are maybe diminishing a little bit, but the ones that I'm using and developing are still growing and developing. So neuroplasticity is a reality throughout our lives, and the people who say, oh, we can't learn, can you teach an old dog new tricks, or you can't learn new things, it's kind of a laziness to decide they don't want to really take on the challenge of this rematrixing work, because it is hard work. This part of changing these habits are difficult because the stasis in the system is to do what we've always done and to not change. So that's the challenge of this. Now, we've come up with some tools to help people live in a more purposeful way. This is going to be hard for you to read, I believe. There's a lot of detail, but I thought it would be useful just to give you a snapshot of a form that we've created called the Purposeful Living Process to help us bring our cognitive capacity to this strategic process of rematrixing. It's true that the core of the work is the yearning-based engagement. It's being in touch with our emotions. So the writing out, this is not the game. Writing out your PLP is not the game. What the game is using this to be able to make those conscious choices moment to moment. So in this case, we're looking at, some assignments that we give, and one of the tools that we use in the Wright Graduate University and in our non-credit programs is designing growth assignments to challenge your limiting beliefs. a growth assignment can look like, we have a whole curriculum of growth assignments. For example, in nourishment and self-care, it could look like simply getting in touch with our emotions, beginning to identify them, to be able to talk about what we want and need. For some of us who haven't really been in touch with our feelings and not knowing what we truly want, this can be an opening experience that can help you change and grow. So the design of these assignments are the liberating part of the model that I described before. You'll notice in this case, the work that I'm doing, I'm looking at 3 assignments at the top of the screen. Trusting emergence, which came out of my work as an emergence coach, and I'll say a little bit about that in a bit. Demonstrating responsibility, which has come out of some of my work in Summer Leadership Intensive, where we're really looking at taking on the challenge of leadership roles, dealing with the anxiety of taking on bigger responsibilities, and I've seen some of my challenges in that, so I've taken on that assignment to keep stepping into those areas. And thirdly, follow yearnings, which came out of our coaching training program in emergence coaching that we did back in February that I've still been working as an assignment in my work. And oh, it looks like the graphic just changed. Did I just change the magnification on this? Oh, it happened over there. Okay, so you'll notice that the sequence, there we go, of the process is to identify the feeling and then look at what are the limiting beliefs that are operating, that are keeping me stuck where I am. What are the empowering beliefs I want to orient to? What are the yearnings that are suppressed? What are some of the dysfunctional patterns that go with the things that trigger me? And what are the functional patterns that I want to realize? And what's the sense of purpose or my purpose or sense of one decision that I want to orient to? So it gives me a way to actually write out and think about my own learning and what I want to orient to and the new visioning that I want to do. So this is the part of that process is that we're always now working our purposeful living process to build those new habits and to have a way that the writing of them actually is part of the process of integrating the learning. And so in spite of the fact that it's emotional at one level, it needs that integrative piece to really get consolidated. And that's an important part of our educational model. So another piece of the purposeful living process is what we call a rematrixing strategy that we do every week. One of the things is we want to look at, in this case, my assignment for the notion of trusting emergence, specific situations that come up where I get caught in a situation where I'm not trusting emergence. And for example, let me explain a little bit as an emergence coach, because coaching is a big part of our program here. And one of the things that I find is that it's very easy for me to think that my value as a coach is what I know, how I can help guide my clients to where they need to go. And I've had a lot of experience, so I think I have the right answers. Well, having my thought that I have the right answers is fine, but when I start directing the coaching based on where I think it ought to go, rather than where the client wants to go, then I'm already stepping out of the emergence process and into a more forcing situation where it's not going to work as well. Because we're really looking at how do we create this space, this open space that allows for yearning-based engagement to happen. And that's the core of our coaching work. So I'm noticing if at any moment I'm feeling anxious in a session, that's one of my triggers. If I feel anxious, I will then notice what's going on in my relationship with my client so that I can pay attention to what they might be feeling and see what question I might need to ask to help clarify the situation. As opposed to, if I'm not conscious of my anxiety, I start operating out of my anxiety, and pretty soon I'm starting to drive the session because I've now taken on the anxiety for where the session needs to go. Is that making sense? So those are the kind of if-then statements to help shift the game. Being mindful in the moment, tracking anxiety in a coaching session for me as a coach is a very useful if-then for my re-implementation process. Peter Gollwitzer is the psychologist who came up with this notion of implementation intentions. And his idea was people often set these declarations of how they want to change, but it doesn't happen because they're too big and they don't have the structures in place to actually make the steps that need to happen. And so what we found is these if-thens allow us to identify the trigger event that makes us want to go unconscious. It could be a mood, it could be a feeling, it could be a soft addiction, things that allow us to go unconscious, to lose that ability to look inwardly and follow our yearnings. And so the if-then then orients to a new thing we can do so we can reorient. Okay? Make sense? So the final part of the purpose living process that I just want to mention is that we have people define vision for themselves and their mission and purpose in the different life areas. We're looking at body and health, your sense of self, your relationship with your family, relationship with others, your work and career. You're looking at defining a vision for yourself in those areas and defining goals. It gives your mind something to orient to engage in this process of rematrixing. So these are all tools, and we have many more tools, but this gives you a little bit of the flavor of some of the things that we use to help people to become more mindful in the moment to be able to live a yearning-based, engaged life. That's the whole game. And the game is really personal transformation. I like this slide because it really gives you the image that at some level we're actually becoming different than who we imagined we could be from the previous perspective. So there really is this sense of progressing to a state that we didn't imagine, and with possibilities we didn't imagine we could fulfill. I also just want to say something about personal authenticity. I think the core yearning in much of this work is to be our authentic selves. And I like this particular quote because I think it reflects the learning model we've been talking about today. Authenticity is not something we have or don't have. It's a practice, a conscious choice of how we want to live. Authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every day. It's about the choice to show up and be real, the choice to be honest, the choice to let our true selves be seen. That's the choice to live a yearning-based life. So authenticity is a very core part of our curriculum. In fact, our personal power quarter, which is beginning shortly in one of our programs, is about becoming your most authentic self. Because personal power actually is not about dominating others, but it's about you becoming more you. So what does our WGU curriculum look like in the few minutes we have to wrap up here? We have graduate programs in emergence coaching and transformational leadership, as I mentioned. The key part of our learning model is that we integrate academic, performative, and applied learning. Every time you're learning about a new subject, say it's emergence coaching, you're learning academic content of what Rogers has written about, what other theorists have written about the notion of a coaching and the process of essentially personal growth in that area. You're learning the content, you're learning what concepts, but you're picking the concepts that you want to learn based on what you connect with. It's still yearning-based driven. It's not just, I want to learn Rogers, I'm going to read the whole Rogers, everything he wrote, because that's the assignment. It's about, I've got a desire to really understand what it means to go into my feelings more deeply, which is something that Roger talked about. So I'm reading the book with the intention to find out more about the subject that I'm already connected to with from a yearning-based perspective. So it's a whole different way of reading. You don't just read all the content, you're reading it based on what's going to answer the yearning that you're trying to identify. So it's a whole new way of thinking about your reading, but it's integrating that academic with the performative. Because I want to learn about it, not just because I want to understand it, I want to use it in my life. And so you get these assignments to help you change your life based on what you're learning in that model. And then you get to apply it through you do coaching. When you're learning coaching, you're also working as a coach under supervision. And you're also doing a seminar or a training with somebody, explaining a concept that you're working with. So you're learning how to be a presenter, a trainer, and demonstrating and influencing people as a leader and as a coach. So you're doing that in each course that we do. We call this Wright Integrative Education because we're integrating all these different things I've been talking about. Transformational leadership, emergence coaching, systems theory, all these different subject areas. The unique thing about our work is it's integrated into a coherent educational framework. It's not just that you're studying all these different areas. We've actually taken the time to look at how they fit together into a unified whole. And so that's the exciting part of this, is that you're learning a way of living as well as a way of understanding yourself and your world. Now I'm going to say something just in wrapping up about two courses that we do. One of them is the master's level capstone, and this is the final course of the capstone project. And what you do in this course is you create your redemptive life narrative. That sounds kind of daunting, doesn't it? It's actually a concept by Dan McAdams that we've been working with, which is the idea that this isn't just your story in the sense that you know how people get involved in telling the story of their life. Redemptive narrative is about who is it that I'm trying to become? Who is it I'm orienting to become? And I'm going to orient my narrative to where did I come from to get to where I am? What are the steps that I've done? And what's the vision of where I'm going? So there's a sense of a forward movement in the narrative from dealing with challenges to getting to where you want to become. And the topics have been fascinating. I mean, one of the topics was from facing the unknown was one of the students from confronting the unconscious and tapping my aliveness. I think that was one of the assignments I remember. Somebody who learned to sort of deaden herself to not have to deal with the challenges of life and opened herself up to explore that unconscious material, drawing on Freud and many other theorists in that area. And that theme became the guiding focus for her capstone. And there are many others as well I can talk about in a bit. So the process of this redemptive narrative is you identify a theme for your transformational learning journey through the master's program. You pick a theme that seems to fit for who I am and who I'm becoming. I mentioned that one. Another one was, I think, from narcissism to authenticity was one. We had one of my students was very much involved in either self-promoting or being one down, but it was not finding that place of authenticity where he could be completely mutual. So he started to use that as his filter for understanding his whole transformational journey. And in doing so, you reflect back on your formative experience in your family. You're writing that section. You're doing the performative learning in your programming, how you're learning and growing as a person. And then you're looking at how you've applied your learning to influence others through training and your coaching and leading. And then finally, finally this piece, the in-depth academic analysis of your central theme, integrating all those different content areas we talked about. So it's this piece here, the in-depth academic piece, is really pulling together the whole integration of the academic, the performative, and the applied. And then finally, looking at your vision for your next step. So as you can see, this is a pretty daunting effort. And I guarantee you, every student who goes through this goes through a personal transformational process just to get that integrated for themselves. Then we have the doctoral level dissertation. And this is the doctoral program that we have in our program. As I mentioned, we have a master's level and a doctoral level, as well as certificate programs in transformational coaching and leadership, as well as social and emotional intelligence, which are other areas that we focus on. But for the doctoral dissertation, you're establishing yourself as a scholar practitioner in a field or career area where you yearn to make a contribution. One of the things we look for, the doctoral students that come to us, we help them work on what's the difference they want to make. What is it that's going to drive your doctoral work? I know one of our students was a Montessori teacher who wanted to have an impact on how social and emotional intelligence could be brought into the world of Montessori teaching. So it's having a focus for the difference you want to make and then using that as the focus for your doctoral work. You complete an EDD level dissertation that contributes to to your transformation and the development of right integrative theory and methods related to your topic. One of my students right now is working on the notion of personal responsibility as it relates to the nonprofit sector professional and what it means to grow and develop in that capacity. So she's working on refining our concept of responsibility and also applying it to her field. Very exciting work. You're applying your learning throughout the program in ways that expand and deepen your impact as a leader and a coach. So you're always developing and perfecting and mastering that capacity for yourself. And finally, the point is that in all of this, the focus continues to be on you, which is very different than any doctoral program you'll ever see, because rarely is it about your transformation. It's usually about the content. So this is one of the few places, maybe the only place I'm aware of, that really integrates those two as much as we do. So thank you for hearing all of that. Here are some of the references that I've been sharing throughout the presentation. As I say, I'll be happy to make this available for you if you'd like. This has been a sharing of learning as we believe it was meant to be. I hope you found it helpful and eye-opening, and I hope you find it inspiring. And if you have any questions or want to contact me later, please feel free to do that either at wrightgrad.edu or also my LinkedIn site, where I have a number of blogs and vlogs about our educational model and our coaching program. So thank you for listening and for participating, and I look forward to hearing your responses. Thank you very much.